Good morning.
Pleasure to have you here.
It's nice to be here.
Last night, Halloween, you and David Cronenberg presented the film Dead Ringers at a special public screening. Do you recall the first time you watched your own performance in Dead Ringers? How did you feel?
I don't. I mean, I watched it so much during the shooting because I was playing identical twins, and I had to make sure that I was doing the variation enough and not too much. And so I had seen a lot of it. But always, when you see a film put together, you become totally admiring of this man who's become a friend during the shoot, David Cronenberg, and who you finally see his finished film, and with great camera work from Peter Suschitzky. So one was, I'm sure, I don't actually remember the first time I saw it all put together, but I remember thinking this is very strong.
The legacy of this film is quite remarkable. It's a film that still makes many lists for being one of the most terrifying movies of all time. And I think I think of you and David Cronenberg as pretty cerebral collaborators, but you two made a film that really hits the fear center. What do people tell you about why they find this so scary?
Well, I think probably for a woman going to a gynecologist is tough anyway. And when you discover your gynecologist is quite as unpredictable and unusual as the Mantle brothers are in Dead Ringers, it must be very frightening. I talked to somebody it was based on a couple called the Marcus brothers in New York. And I've met people who were their patients. And they said, we wouldn't know which one we were meeting, and the sheet was always a bit dirty, and it sort of felt grubby and frightening. And I think doctors, you put your trust in doctors, and when you see a movie where that trust is being betrayed, I think it's very frightening. It gets to a sort of core fear. We don't like being fiddled with by people we can't trust.
There's kind of a legendary story associated with this, too. You playing the identical twins, Elliot and Beverly Mantle, both gynecologists, as you say. Their symbiotic bond leads them towards a self-destruction. The story is that 30 actors turned down David Cronenberg for this controversial role, including William Hurt, Al Pacino, even Christopher Walken. Why did you step up? Why did you want to play this role?
I'd never heard 30. I'd heard 2.
Well, we know at least 3, but I think it's 30 from what I read.
Bob De Niro turned it down. He said if they could be lawyers, he'd do it. And Bill Hurt turned it down because he said he found it mind-bending enough to play one different character to himself. To have to play 2 would completely make him explode. However, why did I step in? Because I thought it would be a good trick. It would be interesting because David asked me. And, when David Cronenberg comes knocking at your door, then you think, well, this will be interesting. I've always wanted to work with interesting
Even then, I mean,
directors.
he's got quite a legacy of films now, but even at that point...
Oh, even at that time he had. I mean, they weren't movies that I would necessarily go and see. I don't go and see horror movies. But, of course, I looked at his work once he showed an interest in working with me. And I thought an amazing imagination. And such a... On the surface, when you meet him, such a nice, ordinary guy, and all this stuff happening inside. But of course, we're all like that, which is why it's interesting playing movies that play people. I call it people who live just outside the bus route. They're on the edges, and it's an interesting journey to get into the heads of such people.
He has a tremendous vision, David Cronenberg does. When you see this exhibition, the first thing or something that really impressed me, even knowing his work and having interviewed him a few times and is just how consistent the vision is from a very young age. From 1969 onward, there's an aesthetic, there's a taste, there's a feel to Cronenberg that remains consistent for decades afterwards.
I've never seen I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've never seen an exhibition like that on a filmmaker. I mean, I've seen exhibitions on filmmakers, but nothing that goes into such detail of the fabric. I mean, there are letters, there are notes that I would have assumed would have been thrown away. But no, they're there, all part of the process of creating and making these films. And as you say, the props, some of which are the most wonderful sculptures. It is really an extraordinary exhibition. And I think Toronto should be very proud of it. And when it travels the world, which it will do, I think David will, I hope he won't have to go around everywhere with it. but he should be justly proud.
But can you speak to that vision? And when it comes to something like Dead Ringers, or for that matter, Butterfly, would there be a meeting where he would be able to communicate? I mean, I know you say he's a nice guy, and you became friends, but how would he communicate that vision to you?
Oh, I don't know. We would just sit and talk about what the scene's about. And it was always very simple. There was never a lot of chat between David and I. I mean, it's sort of clear. I mean, I say David and I. It was always three of us. It was always David, Peter Sushitsky, and I. And we'd sit and work out how the scene was to be. Or in M Butterfly, there was John Lone who would, and very soon we'd, after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we'd have it, and we'd get everybody else in, and they'd begin to see what they were going to have to shoot.
I wanted to ask you one more about Dead Ringers, because you're right, this touring exhibit of artifacts and props from Cronenberg movies contains some of the reimagined, retooled metal gynecological instruments used in Dead Ringers. And virtually every woman I know who has seen that film talks vividly about those nightmarish examination tools. Over the years, have you noticed any gender difference in the way people react to Dead Ringers?
No, I think men find it as difficult as the ladies, because although they don't have to have it done to them, they can imagine what it must be like. So it is a movie that really affects people. I find it hard to watch. It was great to see it again last night, and to see how well it's worn, and to have a remove from a film. That's very important. You can see it the most clearly when it's some years ago, and I suppose, I don't know, it was 20 years ago we made it. And so you in a way are no longer those characters, and you can see them very clearly and see the atmosphere that the director creates.
How did your wife react to Dead Ringers?
She saw it once, and that was it, I think. But knew it was good work. She then went on to make a picture with David Cronenberg herself.
It's interesting because the next film you made after you did Dead Ringers was Barbara Schroeder's Reversal of Fortune.
Yeah.
This is in 1991. You win the Oscar for it. And when you give your acceptance speech for that, as you know, Jeremy, you thanked the co-star in the film, but you also thanked David Cronenberg, even though he wasn't the director of Reversal of Fortune. Why did you thank David Cronenberg?
Well, I thought there was a lot of feeling in Hollywood after Dead Ringers came out and when the Oscars were nominated, and Dead Ringers wasn't nominated, and nor was my performance. And I thought, well, I know why. It's not an Oscar film. It's not a life-enhancing film in a way. It's not something that Americans would want to stand up and say, this is fantastic, isn't it? Drug-ridden gynecologists. However, I think a lot of the voters, the Academy voters, felt that I should have had some recognition for the performance. And so when Reversal of Fortune came out the next year, they were really wanted to get behind it. And I think had it not been for the work that David and I had done together in Dead Ringers, I perhaps wouldn't have been nominated, or perhaps wouldn't have won. Who can tell? But I felt the performance he created with me in Dead Ringers was very much part of my Oscar win.
Would you say Dead Ringers was a game changer then for you in terms of your career?
To a certain extent. I mean, one reviewer said if there was a Nobel Prize for acting, Mr. Ryan should get it. And I thought, well, that's a good review. So I think it affected a lot of people deeply.
Yeah, a few years later, you come back to Toronto to work with David Cronenberg again, playing the lead in M Butterfly. This is a French diplomat who had a 20-year affair with a woman who's in fact a man. On the surface, it's not at all like Dead Ringers, but both films explore the destructive potential of desire and love and the fragility of the self. He aims high with his films. He demands a lot of his actors, his audience, it looks and feels like, and in fact comes from books in a lot of cases, literary filmmaking. Do you think that is rare in an era of blockbusters now?
I think it's getting a lot harder. I think David will probably be the first to agree that it's harder to make what I call a mid-budget movie. More and more, the good writing, the good acting, the good stories are going onto cable. And we're seeing this across America, and I'm sure it's the same in Canada. To make movies of the sort of weight of David's movies is getting harder and harder and harder. And you need to talk to any film director, and he will tell you this, however well known.
And you lament that?
Personally, I do. But I'm pleased that, things change, things evolve, and people are more used to watching the small screen now, whether it be their computer. or the television. But of course, the great thing is that now you can, with television, is you can watch when you want. So,
or binge watch, as the case may be.
That's right. Watch all 12 episodes of whatever. I mean, I've just finished doing a series about the Borgias. And I think probably 10 years ago I wouldn't have done that. But I can see how the good writing is going to television. And in a way, the strong audiences. You've got a much bigger audience. And they're not all watching the football on the other channel, which used to happen, which is why I used to avoid television and want to make film, because I thought films had longer legs. You know, they play in the cinema, then they go on DVD, then they're shown on the television. They have a long life. The same now can be said for television work.
Will you work with David Cronenberg again?
As soon as he asks me, I will be on the plane. I keep telling him this. I say, but it's, you know, it's always the way. He needs to find a picture which has a character which requires me to work in it. But we remain close friends, and I hope a chance will come again.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I know that the pretext of you being here was to talk about David Cronenberg, but I have to ask you about something that I think you're passionate about that makes me very happy to hear about your passion around it, which is your campaign around trying to rid the world of plastic waste. And I've been very outspoken about plastic water bottles and how I think they're a scam, if beyond everything else. Tell me a bit about, if you can, before we end off, about Trashed, the doc and the campaign.
Well, it's a movie we made about a year ago, and I've been spending most of this year traveling around the world showing it. We showed it to many governments, France, Bloomberg's office, we showed it at the New York Times, Washington. I'm off to Indonesia next week to show it in Jakarta, where we filmed their rubbish-filled canals, putrid, and they were so embarrassed by that they have asked us back to show the movie to the government to try to get things changed.
Which government?
The Indonesian government. We managed to stop an incinerator being built in Gloucester. Still too many being built. I think the problem is it's our society. You say plastic water bottles. We're being used to make money for a lot of people, and selling water in bottles is a great way to make money. We have to open our eyes a little bit and demand stuff back. We have to say, if we want our water transportable, let's have it in glass, which can be reusable, or let's make sure that there's facilities in line to reuse the plastic in a plastic water bottle. You probably know that the energy required to make a plastic water bottle is 26 times that energy you get from burning it on waste energy plants. And what comes out of the chimneys of incinerators cannot be microfluorons, which is what's really dangerous, apart from dioxins, which can be released, which are absorbed into the food chain and into our bodies, are immensely dangerous at any level. They cannot be measured. And the problem is that governments are faced with growing amounts of garbage. Well, that's one problem. How do we cut those growing amounts? They have to deal with it, and they want to try to deal with it in a relatively carbon neutral way. The incinerator owners are saying, we can help you do this. We can make the problem disappear, and we'll give you cheap energy. We have to look at that equation, because what we're doing is we're taking away from the recycling industry. The recycling industry, which is an industry we should really support, can make money, but they need bulk. They need all of it in order to make a profit for them. The problem is, if we burn, we're taking away what they can recycle, and we're harming our atmosphere. And if we bury, the same thing.
It feels like we're just on one path towards this, it's dystopic, but towards this trash-filled apocalypse. Do you believe that we can win the war against waste?
Of course I do. I think human beings have an enormous instinct for self-preservation. And I think if we can educate people, and that's partly what we're trying to do with Trashed, which can be downloaded, trashedfilm.com. I think you can buy it on Amazon. I think it'll be on Netflix anytime now. We've just done a four-part cut of the movie, so it can be shown in classrooms, and we're just completing the teaching aids to go with it. And then the film can be shown over four classroom lessons in schools around the world. If we can get the kids to understand, they will see the clearness of it, the obviousness of the solution. But one of the solutions, I think, which doesn't seem to have hit Canada yet because you survived this downturn, but in the rest of Europe and in America, I think we have to start thinking we don't need as much stuff. And we certainly don't need to package the stuff we have as we do. What I now do in supermarkets, or if I buy things in a shop, I'll say, take all that stuff off, would you? I don't want to buy that. I'm not paying for that. And I don't want to deal with that. I just want tomatoes. I don't want them in nice sort of polystyrene little boxes so they don't rock about. I've got a little bag here which I brought in, and I'll put my tomatoes in there and I'll get them home. You deal with the packaging. If we all do that, fill the supermarket exits with their packaging, they will soon go back to their retailers or their wholesalers and say, we got to do something about this packaging because the customers don't like it. We are the governors. We are the bottom of the chain. We can get things changed if we change our habits and if we demand that things are sold to us in a certain way. If we buy a refrigerator, it's surrounded by polystyrene and cardboard. That should go back to the store, be flat packed, go back to the people who sell it so it can be reused. That should be a given. And as we say in the movie, many things we've changed. We make people wear seatbelts now. You'd think you'd never be able to do that. People will change their habits. Many of us have stopped smoking. People will change their habits. We just have to tell people that we cannot keep producing this amount of garbage and then wasting it, burning it, burying it. We live in a finite world and we're very much a growing population. We have to grow through this adolescent period we've had of consumerism where we feel let's have everything we can, just like a kid will, goes into a toy store, wants everything. And we've, since 1945, we've been through this great consumer growth. And I think we have to look and say, well, wait a minute, we certainly don't need it. We're told we want it. All the time on the television we're being told we'll be happy if we buy that, we'll be happier if we do that, etc., etc. This is rubbish. Happiness are personal relationships and communications between people. It's nothing to do with things. As long as hopefully you've got enough money to eat and you have a roof over your head, that we do need to give people. But all this other stuff, which apparently allows our economy to grow, we have to design an economy which doesn't need us to buy all this rubbish in order to keep the economy going. We have to redesign that, rethink that.
It's good to see you again. Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure.